He divorced me on my graduation day. He had no idea I was about to close an $800 million deal. I stood on that stage wearing my graduation gown. The soft, white fabric felt perfect against my skin. My heart was beating so fast with happiness and excitement. This was supposed to be the greatest day of my entire life. I had worked so hard to get here, so many late nights studying, so many hours away from my family. So many times I pushed through when I was tired and wanted to quit. I gave up so much to balance school and everything else in my life. My family sat in the audience watching me. My mother was already crying tears of joy. My father had that proud smile on his face, the smile he always gave me when he knew I was about to do something amazing. And there, sitting in the middle of everyone, was my husband, Marcus Williams, the man I thought would stay with me forever, the man I had given everything to. But I didn't know that in just a few minutes, my whole life was gonna break into pieces, right there in front of everyone I loved. Let me stop here for a second. I need you to understand what's about to happen. If you're watching this story right now, I want you to subscribe to Pressify Stories. Hit that notification bell so you never miss stories like this one. And please, before we keep going, write your country in the comments below. Let me know where you're watching from. It means everything to me to know who's listening to my story. Now, let me take you back to where everything really started. Not on that graduation stage, but years before, when things were different, when the future looked bright and full of hope. Marcus and I grew up together in Miami, Florida. We weren't just boyfriend and girlfriend from the start, we were best friends first. That's what everyone always said about us. Those two are best friends who fell in love. And it was true. From the time we were teenagers, sitting on the steps outside his building or hanging out at the places where young people like us went, we talked about everything. We dreamed together. We made plans together. We were young and hungry for more. That's the best way to describe it. We wanted more from life than what we saw around us. We wanted to be successful. We wanted to build something big. We wanted to be free, really free. Not stuck because we didn't have money or opportunities. Late at night, we would sit and talk about how we were going to become millionaires, how we were going to build something real and big, how we were going to change our lives and help our families too. Marcus was the big dreamer. He had huge ideas and even bigger energy. He wanted everything to happen right away. He was impatient, always looking for the next chance to make money, the quick win that would get us where we wanted to be. He wasn't a bad person, not at all. He was just hungry in a way that made him move fast, sometimes too fast, sometimes without thinking about what would happen later. And me? I was different. I was quieter, more careful. I loved planning things out. I loved thinking through all the details, working out how things would actually work before we jumped in. I was the one who kept us steady while Marcus wanted to fly. We balanced each other perfectly. At least, that's what I thought. We made promises to each other back then. Not just romantic promises, something deeper, the kind of loyalty that comes from building something together, from sharing dreams and hopes and fears. We promised that no matter what happened, we would always have each other's backs. We would be a team. That promise felt sacred to me. It felt like the most important thing in the world. When Marcus asked me to marry me, it felt like the natural next step. We had already been through so much together. We had already shared our deepest dreams and biggest fears. Marriage was just making official what we already knew, that we belonged together. I said yes immediately. I didn't even have to think about it. The wedding was beautiful, small and intimate, filled with people who loved us. My best friend Jessica Martinez stood beside me as my maid of honor. She and I had been best friends since we were little kids, just like Marcus and I. The three of us had grown up together. We understood each other in ways that only come from shared history and shared struggles. Jessica was more like my sister than my friend. She knew me inside and out, or at least I thought she did. After the wedding, Jessica asked if she could live with us for a while. She said she was going through a tough time, that life wasn't working out the way she had planned. Marcus and I had just gotten our first small apartment together. We had an extra room. Of course she could stay with us. That's what family does, right? That's what best friends do. You open your home. You open your heart. I trusted her completely. That was my first mistake, though I didn't know it at the time. In those early years of marriage, Marcus and I were building something. It wasn't easy. Money was tight, we both worked jobs that didn't pay much, and I decided to go back to school to get my degree. It was hard on both of us. I had to spend hours studying instead of being home with my husband. I had to work part-time while going to school full-time. Marcus had to do more at home. But we did it together. We kept reminding each other of our dreams, of the vision we had created on those apartment steps years ago. Slowly, very slowly, Marcus started to make money. It wasn't a lot at first, just small amounts here and there. That it was something. It was proof that our hard work was starting to pay off, proof that our dreams weren't just fantasies. I was so proud of him. I would tell him, "Marcus, we're doing it. We're really building something." And he would smile at me like I was the reason it was all happening. But somewhere around that time, something changed. I didn't notice it at first. I was too focused on school, too focused on building my future. But looking back now, I can see the exact moment when things started to go wrong. Jessica was still living with us. She had said she would stay for a few months, but months turned into a year, then years. I didn't mind. At least, I didn't think I did. Family. We had always said that family came first, that loyalty was everything. But I started to notice small things. Jessica was around the house more when I wasn't there. When I would come home from classes or from work, I would find them sitting together in the living room, and they would quickly move apart or change what they were talking about. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. I was stressed from school, I was tired, I was imagining things. Then I started to notice how Jessica dressed on certain days, how she would suddenly decide to take a shower and get ready when she had been in her pajamas all day, how her whole mood would change when Marcus came home, and how Marcus's eyes would light up in a way that made my stomach hurt. I remember the first time I really felt it, the weight of knowing something was wrong. It was a Saturday afternoon. I had come home early from the library where I had been studying. I thought it would be a nice surprise. I thought maybe we could spend some time together, maybe go get lunch. When I opened the apartment door, I heard laughter coming from the bedroom, both of their laughter, his and hers. I stood there in the hallway. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. I didn't go in. I turned around and walked back out. I sat in my car for 3 hours, not moving, not thinking, just existing in this terrible space between knowing and not wanting to know. When I finally went back inside, they were both sitting in the living room, acting completely normal. Jessica was reading a magazine. Marcus was watching TV. They looked up at me like nothing had happened, like my world hadn't just fallen apart. "Hey, babe," Marcus said, getting up to hug me. "I didn't know you were home." "I came back early," I said quietly. I was looking at Jessica. She wouldn't look at me. "That's nice. Are you hungry? We could order something." I told him I wasn't feeling well. I went to bed. I lay there in the dark, listening to them talk in the living room, listening to every word, trying to convince myself that I was wrong, that this couldn't be happening. But I knew. Deep down in my soul, I knew exactly what was happening. My best friend was sleeping with my husband. The two people I loved most in the world were betraying me in the most painful way possible. I didn't confront them. I know that sounds weak, but I wasn't ready to face it.
I wasn't ready to destroy everything. I was still in school. I still had dreams that needed stability, dreams that needed this marriage to work out. So I stayed silent. I pretended I didn't know. And every single day, I died a little bit inside. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself, though that was unbearable. The worst part was the lying. The way they would smile at me, the way Jessica would hug me and tell me how much she loved me, the way Marcus would kiss me goodnight, and I would wonder if he had kissed her that same day. The way they both sat at the dinner table with my family, eating the food I cooked, talking about life and dreams and loyalty, all while looking me straight in the eye and lying. I remember days when I would come home and hear them moving around the apartment quickly, trying to act like they had been doing something innocent, when really they had been doing something that would destroy me. I remember finding Jessica's hair on my pillow, having to sit down before my legs gave out. I remember him working late, and me knowing exactly what he was doing, and him coming home smelling of her perfume. My mother noticed something was wrong. She pulled me aside one day and asked me if everything was okay with Marcus. I told her yes. I lied to protect him, even while he was destroying me. I lied to protect Jessica, even while she was stabbing me in the back. That's how much I loved them. That's how much I believed in loyalty and family, even when they were using it against me. As the months passed, the pain started to transform into something else. It transformed into determination. I focused harder on my studies. I pushed myself further. I told myself that if my marriage was going to fall apart, at least I would have my degree. At least I would have something of my own that no one could take from me. My education became my safe place. It became the one thing I could control, the one thing that belonged completely to me. I was in my final year of school when I started to feel like I could breathe again, not because the betrayal had gone away. It never did. But because I was almost done, I was almost free. I could almost see the finish line. Marcus noticed how focused I had become. He would sometimes comment on it. "You're going to do amazing things, Sarah," he would say. I would smile and nod, wondering if he even understood the irony. Saying that while he was secretly destroying the person I had been before all of this. Jessica was still living with us, though by this time the affair seemed less intense than it had been. There were still moments when I would catch them looking at each other in a certain way, but mostly they had become more careful, more secretive. Or maybe I had learned to ignore it better. Maybe that's what survival looks like, learning to ignore the pain and keep moving forward.
My graduation day was supposed to be a celebration of how far I had come. It was supposed to be a moment where I could look back at all the hard work, all the sacrifice, all the nights I stayed up studying while my marriage fell apart, and feel proud. It was supposed to be a day where the world recognized that I had done it. I had achieved something. I had built something of value. I didn't know that it was also going to be the day everything fell apart. I remember getting ready that morning. I put on my graduation gown carefully. I looked at myself in the mirror. I thought about the girl I had been when I started school. I thought about how much I had changed, how much I had grown. I thought about how I was about to step into a new chapter of my life. I was nervous and excited and hopeful all at the same time. My mother helped me with my cap and gown. She kept telling me how proud she was. "You did this, Sarah," she said, tears in her eyes. "You worked so hard and you did this." Marcus drove me to the graduation ceremony. The car ride was quiet. He seemed distant, like he was thinking about something else. I asked him if he was fine. He said he was fine. He said he was just thinking about how proud he was of me. I believed him then. I wanted to believe him. When we arrived at the ceremony, my family was already there. My father stood up and hugged me. My aunts and uncles congratulated me. My cousins took pictures. It felt like the life I had always wanted, the life where my family was together celebrating my success.
I didn't notice that Jessica was sitting with Marcus, not with the rest of my family. I didn't notice how close they were sitting to each other. I was too caught up in the moment, too lost in the belief that everything was going to be okay. I sat in the stands with the other graduates, waiting for my turn to walk across the stage. My heart was pounding. I kept looking out into the audience to find Marcus. There he was, sitting in the middle with my family around him. He was smiling. I smiled back. I thought everything was going to be fine. But I was about to learn that sometimes the worst moments of your life come disguised as the best moments. Sometimes the people you love the most are capable of hurting you in ways you never imagined. Sometimes betrayal arrives right when you're about to celebrate your triumph. The ceremony was moving slowly. Name after name was called. Person after person walked across that stage. I was nervous, but excited. This was it. This was the moment where everything I had worked for became real. This was the moment where I became something more than just a wife, just a woman standing behind her husband's dreams. I was about to become a woman with her own degree, her own accomplishment, her own future. My last name started with a W. There was still a while before they got to me. I sat there and trying to control my breathing, trying not to cry before it was even my turn. Around me, other graduates were nervous too. Some were texting, some were praying, some were just staring ahead, lost in their own thoughts. And then I heard it, my name, Sarah Walker. I stood up on shaking legs. I walked toward the stage. My heart was racing so fast I could barely hear anything else. I climbed the steps, I crossed the stage, and as I reached out to accept my diploma, I looked out into the audience. That's when I saw him stand up. Marcus was standing up in the middle of the audience, drawing everyone's attention. I thought he was standing to clap for me, to celebrate my achievement. I thought he was being supportive and proud. I held my diploma to my chest. I started to smile. But then he reached for the microphone that was at the edge of the stage. Security moved toward him, but he was faster. He grabbed it, and suddenly his voice boomed through the entire venue. "I need to say something," he said. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it that made my blood run cold. "I need everyone here to know the truth about this woman." I felt like the world had stopped. The ceremony had paused. Every single person in that auditorium was now staring at me, waiting to hear what he had to say. "Sarah has contributed nothing to our marriage," he continued, his voice growing louder, more aggressive. "She spent all her time in school, all her energy on her books and her classes. What about me? What about my needs? What about everything I've done to support her while she was being selfish?" I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I was standing there on the stage holding my diploma while my husband publicly humiliated me, while he told a room full of hundreds of people that I was selfish, that I didn't matter, that I was a burden. I could feel my mother's eyes from the audience.
To cry. I cried for the girl I had been. I cried for the trust I had given. I cried for the loyalty I had offered to people who didn't deserve it. I cried for all the nights I had stayed silent, pretending I didn't know what was happening, protecting them instead of protecting myself. But underneath the tears, something else was growing, something that felt like power, something that felt like purpose. I stood up from that bench. I looked at my diploma. I looked at my graduation gown. And I made a decision. I was going to rebuild my life. I was going to use this opportunity. I was going to become so successful, so powerful, so undeniably brilliant that everyone would regret underestimating me. And when that moment came, when Marcus and Jessica finally realized what they had lost, what they had given up, I was going to be ready. I didn't know exactly how it would happen. I didn't have a plan yet, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. My story wasn't over. It was just beginning.
The phone call ended. I sat there in complete silence. The noise from the graduation ceremony continued inside the venue. I could hear people talking, laughing, the announcer calling the next names. But out here in the parking lot, I was alone with my diploma and the weight of what had just happened. $800 million. Money that I had earned. Money that came from my brain, my strategy, my vision. Money that was completely and totally mine. I thought about Marcus. I thought about how just minutes ago he had told the entire world that I had nothing to contribute. He had humiliated me on that stage in front of hundreds of people. He had made it seem like I was a burden, like I was a parasite living off his success, like I was worthless. And all the while, I was closing the biggest business deal of my generation. The bitterness of it made me laugh again. Not a happy laugh, the kind of laugh that comes from a place of dark understanding, from the realization that life has a sense of irony so profound it almost feels like a cruel joke. I needed to get out of here. I needed to leave this place before I had to face anyone else, before I had to explain what happened, or comfort my crying mother, or listen to my father's angry words about Marcus. I wasn't ready for any of that yet. I was still processing everything. I stood up and walked toward my car. I had come here with Marcus in his vehicle, but I called a rideshare to get me away from this place. I sent Marcus a text message, something I would come to regret later because it was too nice, too calm, too forgiving for what he had done. I'm going home. I need some time alone. He didn't respond. Of course he didn't. He was probably too busy celebrating with Jessica. I could imagine them right now, holding hands, laughing about how they had finally exposed their secret to the world. I could imagine my best friend thinking about how she had won, how she had taken my husband from me, how she had humiliated me in the process. The rideshare arrived. I got in the back. The driver asked me how my day was. I told him it was fine. I told him I had just graduated from college. He congratulated me. I thanked him, and then I put my head against the window and I stopped talking. When I got home to the apartment I shared with Marcus, the first thing I did was go to my room. We had separate bedrooms by this point. I had insisted on it months ago when I finally acknowledged what was happening between him and Jessica. I had told him I needed space, that the stress of school made me need my own place to sleep. He had agreed without argument, which only confirmed what I already knew. I sat on my bed, still wearing my graduation gown, and I called David Anderson back. "I have questions," I said without any introduction. "I need to understand what happened, how this deal came through, and what the next steps are." David seemed surprised by how direct I was, but he answered every question I asked. He explained that my business proposal had been circulated among the board members 3 months ago. It had taken them this long to make their final decision, but the vote was unanimous. They wanted to invest in my company. They wanted to make this deal happen, and they wanted it to happen quickly. "We understand you're young," David said carefully. "We understand this is your first major venture, but what you've proposed is revolutionary. You have a vision that the rest of the industry is going to be trying to copy for years, and we want to be the ones backing you from the start." I felt something shift inside me as he talked. This wasn't about Marcus. This wasn't about proving something to him or Jessica. This was about me. This was about my worth, my intelligence, my ability to create something of value in this world. This was about who I was, separate from my marriage, separate from the people who had betrayed me. By the time we finished talking, I had started to form a plan. It wasn't a revenge plan, not exactly. It was a survival plan. It was a plan to build the life I had always imagined for myself. But now I would be doing it alone. Better alone, actually. Better without the weight of Marcus's impatience dragging me down. Better without Jessica's fake smiles and false friendship cutting into my heart every day. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the deal. I met with lawyers, I signed contracts, I opened business accounts, I hired a team. I worked 14-hour days, sleeping only a few hours at night, eating at my desk, completely consumed by the work of building my empire. Marcus came and went from the apartment like a ghost. We barely spoke. He asked me once if I was okay. I told him I was fine. I asked him once if everything was okay with Jessica. He told me it was, that they were actually planning to get married. He said it like he expected me to cry or argue or beg him to stay. I just nodded and went back to work. The divorce proceeded quickly. I signed the papers without fighting him on anything. He wanted the apartment? Take it. He wanted his car? Fine. I didn't care about any of it, because I was about to have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. What did I need with a cheap apartment or a used car? During this time, I did something else. I hired a therapist. I started going to sessions twice a week. I sat in that office and I cried. I talked about the betrayal. I talked about the pain of having my best friend betray me. I talked about the humiliation of the graduation day. And slowly, very slowly, I started to heal. My therapist told me something I never forgot. She said, "Sarah, what happened to you was terrible. Your husband and your best friend treated you in a way that no one deserves to be treated. But you cannot let what they did define you. You cannot let their cruelty become your story. You have to decide what your story is going to be." Those words changed me. They gave me permission to stop being a victim and start being a survivor. They gave me permission to move forward without carrying the weight of their betrayal with me forever.
Satisfying moment I had experienced since closing my $800 million deal. I walked into the crowd, and people started to approach me. Friends from my past, people I had known before Marcus, people who had watched my marriage to him unfold. They started to ask me what I had been doing, where I had been, and I told them the truth. "I've been building my empire," I said simply. "I closed an $800 million deal 3 months ago. I'm starting a company that's going to change the industry." I could see the moment when it clicked for them. I could see them recalculating their opinion of me, reconsidering what they thought they knew about my life. I could see them looking at my dress, my hair, my car, my entire transformed self, and understanding that Sarah Walker was no longer someone to pity. Sarah Walker was someone to be impressed by. And then I saw him. Marcus was standing across the room, and he was staring at me like he had seen a ghost. Jessica was next to him, her hand in his, and her face was slowly draining of color. I made my way over to them. I was going to walk right past them at first, but then I decided against it. I deserved to face them. I deserved to let them know exactly what I had become. "Marcus," I said, my voice calm and pleasant. "Jessica, congratulations on your engagement." Marcus looked like he couldn't speak. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Jessica was gripping his arm so hard her knuckles were turning white. "Sarah," Marcus finally managed, we didn't think you would come." "Didn't you?" I said. I smiled at him, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who knows a secret. "I'm here to tell you that I'm sponsoring your wedding." Marcus's eyes widened. "What do you mean, sponsoring?" "I mean that I'm paying for it, all of it. The venue, the flowers, the food, the music, the photographer, everything. Consider it my wedding gift to you both, a gift from the woman you betrayed, humiliated, and left." I could see the confusion on their faces. This wasn't what they had expected. They had expected me to be angry, to be vindictive, to make a scene. They hadn't expected me to offer them something. They didn't understand yet that this wasn't about kindness. This was about something much more calculated. "Sarah, that's very generous," Marcus began. But I held up my hand. "I'm not done yet," I said. "I also want you to know that I've been doing very well for myself. Better well, actually.
I closed an $800 million business deal. I'm starting a company that's going to change the industry. I'm going to be one of the most successful businesswomen in this city, and I wanted to make sure you both knew that. I wanted to make sure you understood what you gave up when you decided to betray me." I let that sink in for a moment. I could see it hitting them like a wave. They had thought I would fall apart after the graduation day. They had thought I would struggle and fail and spend years trying to get over what they had done. Instead, I had thrived. "So yes," I continued, "I'm sponsoring your wedding, and I'm going to be there to watch you get married. Isn't that wonderful?" I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked away from them, feeling their eyes on my back the entire time. I made my way to the bar and ordered myself a drink. I stood there sipping it slowly, watching the party continue around me. I was the most interesting person in the room, and everyone knew it. Over the course of the evening, so many people came up to me and asked me about my business, about my success, about what I was doing. They wanted to know how I had managed to build something so big so quickly. They wanted to know if I was hiring. They wanted to know if I would mentor them. I gave them my card and told them to reach out. I was building not just a business empire, but a personal one as well. I was becoming the kind of woman that people wanted to know, wanted to work with, wanted to be around. I was becoming powerful. Near the end of the evening, I went to find Marcus and Jessica again. They were sitting at a table with some of their family members, and they looked absolutely miserable. The party was supposed to be a celebration of their engagement, but instead it had become a painful reminder of what they had destroyed in order to be together. "I wanted to give you something," I said, handing them an envelope. "A wedding gift. Consider it my blessing." Jessica took the envelope with shaking hands. She opened it and looked inside, and her face went pale. It was a check, a very large check. Not large because it was generous, but large because it was a donation to charity in their names, a donation that said in monetary terms how little I thought of their union. "Thank you, Sarah," Jessica whispered. She didn't look at me when she said it. "You're welcome," I replied. "I hope you'll be very happy together. You've certainly earned it." And then I left. I drove away from that party feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt free. Not because Marcus and Jessica were finally out of my life. They had already been out of my life for months. I felt free because I had faced them, and I had shown them who I had become. I had shown them that their betrayal, as painful as it was, had not destroyed me. It had made me stronger.
The next morning, I woke up in my beautiful apartment, in my beautiful bed, and I went to work. I had a company to build. I had a vision to execute. I had a future to create. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like the future was completely and totally mine. Over the next few months, I threw myself into my work with even more intensity. I was everywhere, at industry events, on podcasts, giving interviews about my business philosophy. I was becoming a known name in my field. People were talking about me, about my age, about my success, about how a young woman from Miami had somehow managed to build a multi-million-dollar empire in just a few months. I hired the best people I could find. I invested in the best technology. I created a work environment where innovation was celebrated and creativity was encouraged. I became not just a CEO, but a mentor. People wanted to work for me. People wanted to learn from me. And through it all, I made sure that Marcus and Jessica knew exactly how well I was doing. I did this not out of spite, though there was some of that. I did it because I wanted to show them, and more importantly, show myself, that I was unstoppable, that their betrayal had not slowed me down, that I had not just survived, I had thrived. About 4 months after the graduation day, I hired a private investigator. I wanted to know what was happening in Marcus's life. I told myself it was just curiosity, but really it was something else. It was a need to understand what had happened.
why they had done what they did, whether they were even happy now that they had each other. The investigator reported back to me a few weeks later. What he told me confirmed something I'd suspected for a while. Marcus was not doing well. The money he had been making when we were married was drying up. He was struggling to find work. He was sinking deeper and deeper into financial trouble. And Jessica? It seemed she was not as committed to him as he thought. The investigator had found messages on her social media account where she was talking to other men. She was flirting with someone at her gym. She was entertaining proposals from other people. She had wanted Marcus for what she thought he had, but now that she was realizing he didn't have much of anything, she was already looking for someone else. I found this information deeply satisfying, not in a vengeful way, but in a way that felt like justice. They had destroyed my life because they thought Marcus had money and potential. They had betrayed me because they believed a lie about his success. And now they were going to pay the price for their choices. But I wasn't going to make them pay. Life was going to do that all on its own. As the date of Marcus and Jessica's wedding approached, I made sure everything was perfect. I had hired the best wedding planner in Miami. I had booked the most beautiful venue. I had arranged for the most beautiful flowers, the most delicious food, the most talented musicians. Their wedding was going to be absolutely stunning. And then, when they realized they couldn't pay for any of it, they were going to have to accept my money. They were going to have to owe me forever. I wasn't going to let them know how much money I was spending on their wedding. I was going to present them with the bill at the end, and I was going to make sure they understood that this was what I gave them out of the goodness of my heart. They were going to be grateful to me for the rest of their lives. 2 weeks before the wedding, I got a phone call. It was my mother. "Sarah, honey, I need to talk to you about something," she said. Her voice was careful, like she was walking on eggshells. "What is it?" I asked. "Marcus called me," she said. "He's asking if there's any way you would consider the divorce. He says he made a terrible mistake. He says he misses you. He says he wants to try again." I actually laughed out loud when she told me that. The audacity of him, the absolute unbelievable audacity. "Tell him no," I said calmly. "Tell him I'm not interested, and tell him that Sarah Walker has moved on to bigger and better things." My mother tried to push me, tried to convince me that maybe there was a possibility we could work things out. She was a forgiving woman, and she believed in the power of redemption and second chances. But I wasn't my mother. I didn't have it in me to forgive him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. After I hung up with her, I thought about what Marcus had said. He was having regrets. He was realizing that he had made a terrible mistake. Good. That was exactly what I wanted him to feel. But I also realized something. I realized that I wasn't actually angry at him anymore. I was sad for him. I was sad that he had thrown away something beautiful because he was impatient and greedy and weak. I was sad that he let Jessica manipulate him into betraying me. I was sad that he was about to marry someone who didn't love him, who was already looking at other men. This was more powerful than revenge. This was poetic justice. The week of the wedding arrived, and I made my final preparations. I had my hair done, I had my nails done, I bought a new dress for the occasion. Nothing too flashy, nothing that would draw too much attention. I wanted to be elegant and understated. I wanted my presence to speak for itself. On the morning of the wedding, I woke up, and I sat at my desk. I looked at my calendar. I looked at my business plans. I looked at the future that was spreading out before me, full of possibility and success and purpose. This was my life now. This was who I had become. And tonight, I was going to walk into Marcus and Jessica's wedding, and I was going to show them exactly what they had lost. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather. Blue skies, warm sunshine, the kind of day that felt like a blessing from God. I drove to the venue in my car, the same beautiful car I had driven to the engagement party, and I felt completely calm. Not nervous, not anxious, just calm.
The wedding venue was absolutely stunning. It was a historic mansion that had been converted into an event space, with beautiful gardens surrounding it. The flowers were in full bloom, roses and peonies and lilies in every color imaginable. The decorations were elegant and tasteful. Everything was beautiful. Everything was perfect, because I had made sure of it. Every single detail of this wedding had been arranged by my team, paid for by my money, and executed to perfection. Marcus and Jessica thought this wedding was their dream come true. They didn't know that every beautiful moment, every elegant touch, every perfect detail was actually a gift from the woman they had betrayed. I arrived at the venue about an hour before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. I wasn't there to help with last-minute preparations. That wasn't my role. I was there to observe. I was there to be ready for my moment. The wedding coordinator, a woman I had hired personally, saw me arrive and smiled. She knew who I was. She knew why I was there. She had been instructed to make sure that everything about this wedding was absolutely flawless, because I wanted Marcus and Jessica to have the most beautiful wedding possible. Not because I loved them, but because I wanted them to remember this day forever. I wanted them to remember how perfect this day was, and I wanted them to know that they owed it all to me. I sat in a private room at the venue and watched the chaos unfold from a distance. The bridesmaids were running around trying to help Jessica get ready. The groomsmen were helping Marcus with his final preparations. The guests were arriving, taking their seats, mingling in the beautiful gardens. And somewhere in all of that chaos, Marcus and Jessica were probably thinking that they had made it. They were probably thinking that they had won, that they had gotten everything they wanted, that their betrayal had paid off, and they were going to live happily ever after together. They were so wrong. As the time for the ceremony grew closer, I made my way to the back of the main hall where the wedding was going to take place. The guests were all seated. The music was about to start. The wedding was about to begin. I sat in a chair at the very back, where Marcus and Jessica wouldn't notice me immediately. I wanted to watch their faces when they realized I was there. I wanted to see that moment of shock, that moment of understanding that Sarah Walker had not only survived, but had thrived. The wedding began exactly on schedule. The bridesmaids walked down the aisle, the groomsmen stood at the altar, and then Jessica appeared, walking down the aisle in a beautiful white wedding dress. She looked radiant. She looked like a woman who was about to marry the man of her dreams and live happily ever after. I felt nothing watching her. No sadness, no anger, just a cold observation of a woman who was about to have her entire world turned upside down. Marcus was standing at the altar, and when he saw Jessica, his face lit up with what looked like genuine love. For a moment, I almost felt bad for him. Almost. But then I remembered every time he had kissed me while he was sleeping with her. I remembered every time he had told me he loved me while he was betraying me. I remembered the look on his face when he humiliated me on that graduation stage. No, I didn't feel bad for him, not a little bit. The ceremony was short and sweet. They exchanged vows, they exchanged rings, and when the minister said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the entire crowd stood and cheered. This was the moment they had been waiting for. This was the moment they thought was the beginning of their happily ever after. I stood as well, and I began to clap, slowly at first, and then with more intensity. A few people around me turned to look at me, confused. Why was this woman clapping so loudly? Why did she seem so happy about this wedding? They would understand soon enough. The newlyweds walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, and the guests began to move toward the reception area. This was where the real celebration was going to happen. This was where the food was going to be served, where the music was going to play, where the toasts were going to be given. I made my way to the reception area, and I found the wedding coordinator. I gave her a nod, and she understood. It was time. The reception started as planned. The guests were seated at tables, the food was brought out. It was all delicious, all perfect, because I had hired the best caterer in Miami to prepare it. The music began to play. A band that I had personally selected started to perform. Everything was beautiful. Everything was exactly as it should be for a wedding celebration. And then, at the perfect moment, after the first course had been served, after the guests had settled in and were enjoying the food and the music, then I made my entrance. I had been waiting in a private room, and when the wedding coordinator gave me the signal, I walked out into the reception hall. I was wearing a dress that was even more stunning than the one I had worn to the engagement party. It was a deep burgundy, tailored perfectly to my body, elegant and powerful and absolutely breathtaking. The moment I walked into the room, people noticed. Conversations stopped. Eyes turned toward me. And slowly, the realization began to dawn on people's faces as they recognized who I was. That's when Marcus saw me. I watched the color drain from his face. I watched Jessica reach over and grip his arm, confused by his reaction. And then she saw me too, and her face went completely white.
I walked toward the front of the room where the newly married couple was sitting at their table. I moved with confidence, with power, with the knowledge of who I was and what I had accomplished. I moved like a woman who had built an empire while they were planning their wedding. "Congratulations," I said, my voice clear and strong enough that the entire room could hear me. "Marcus and Jessica, congratulations on your wedding." Marcus said, standing up quickly. Why are you here?" "I'm here because I invited myself," I said, simply. "More accurately, I'm here because I'm the one who paid for this entire wedding." I could see the shock ripple through the room. The guests were leaning forward, trying to understand what I was saying. Jessica's parents were looking at her, looking at Marcus, trying to figure out what was happening. "What do you mean?" Jessica asked, her voice small and frightened. "I mean exactly what I said. This beautiful venue? Paid for by me. These flowers? Paid for by me. This food you've all been enjoying? Paid for by me. This band playing music? Paid for by me. Every single beautiful detail of this wedding was arranged and paid for by Sarah Walker." I paused and let that sink in. I could see Marcus and Jessica trying to process what I was saying. I could see the confusion on their faces, transforming into something else. Shame, embarrassment, fear. "I wanted to give you the most beautiful wedding possible," I continued. "I wanted you to have the perfect day. And now, I wanted to make sure you understood something. I wanted to make sure you knew that everything you have today, everything you're celebrating, you owe to me. The woman you betrayed, the woman you humiliated, the woman you thought you had defeated." I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope. I walked over to where they were sitting, and I laid the envelope on the table in front of them. "This is the bill for your wedding. Every penny accounted for. When you're ready to pay me back, let me know. I have all the time in the world." Marcus picked up the envelope with shaking hands. He opened it and looked at the bill, and his face went even whiter than it already was. I could see him silently reading the numbers, realizing that he and Jessica would never be able to pay this amount of money, not in 100 years, not unless something miraculous happened. "There's something else," I said. I reached into my purse again, and this time I pulled out a different piece of paper. A very important piece of paper. "What is this?" Marcus asked, looking at it. "That," I said, "is your new divorce decree. I had my lawyer draw it up this morning. You see, while you were getting ready for your wedding today, I was finalizing the paperwork to officially end our marriage. Not in a way that benefits you, in a way that ensures you get nothing. No house, no car, no savings, nothing. You gave up any claim to my future success the moment you decided to humiliate me on my graduation day." Marcus stared at the paper like it was a bomb that had just been dropped on him. "That's not fair," Jessica said, tears streaming down her face. "Sarah, that's not fair. We love each other. We deserve to be happy." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I felt something close to pity, but I pushed it away. "You had a choice," I said to her. "You had a choice when you decided to betray me. You had a choice when you started seeing my husband behind my back. You had a choice on my graduation day when you accepted his proposal instead of standing by your best friend. You made your choices, Jessica. Now you get to live with them." I turned back to Marcus. "And you also had a choice. You could have been loyal to me. You could have waited until I finished school, and we could have built our empire together. You could have been the man you told me you wanted to be when we were young and hungry and full of dreams. But instead, you chose to betray me. You chose impatience over loyalty. You chose her over me." I gestured to Jessica, and I could see her flinch at the dismissal in my gesture. Good. Let her realize that I knew what she had been doing. Let her understand that my investigators had found her messages to other men. Let her know that I knew that she was already planning her exit from this marriage. "There's one more thing," I said. "I wanted to announce something to all of you, because I think you should all know. I closed an $800 million business deal. That was on my graduation day. The same day Marcus decided to divorce me on stage. While he was humiliating me, I was closing the biggest business deal of my generation. And now, I'm the CEO of a major company. I'm a multi-millionaire, a self-made woman who built something from nothing while dealing with the worst betrayal of my life." The room erupted in whispers. People were looking at me differently now. People who had come to Marcus and Jessica's wedding were now—
We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown, a neutral location. I arrived early and sat at a table by the window. I ordered myself a coffee and I waited. When Jessica arrived, I barely recognized her. Her hair was dull. Her face was gaunt. She had lost weight, and not in a healthy way. She looked like someone who had been destroyed by her own choices. She sat down across from me, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. "I'm sorry," she finally said. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I know that doesn't mean anything. I know that sorry doesn't fix what I did. But I needed you to hear it. I needed you to know that I regret every single moment of it." "Do you?" I asked. "Do you really regret it? Or do you just regret it that it didn't work out the way you planned?" "No," said Jessica, tears streaming down her face. "I regret all of it. I regret betraying you. I regret hurting you. I regret letting Marcus manipulate me. I regret everything." I sipped my coffee slowly. "Tell me something," I said. "When you were sleeping with my husband while I was studying for my exams, did you regret it then? Did you feel bad for me then?" Jessica flinched. "No," she admitted. "I didn't. I was too caught up in what I wanted. I was too focused on Marcus, on the fact that he was making money, on the fact that I thought he could provide for me. I wasn't thinking about you. I wasn't thinking about how much I was hurting you." "And when you accepted his proposal on my graduation day, when you humiliated me in front of hundreds of people, did you feel bad then?" "Yes," Jessica said quietly. "I felt something, but I was too afraid to face it. I was too afraid to admit what I had done. So I just kept moving forward, pretending that everything was fine, pretending that I had destroyed my best friend." I put down my coffee cup. "You want to know what the worst part was?" I asked. "It wasn't Marcus's betrayal. I had already figured out that Marcus was weak. I had already understood that he was impatient and greedy, and that he didn't have the kind of vision I had. But you, Jessica, you were supposed to be my sister. You were supposed to be the one person I could always count on, and you turned out to be a liar and a thief." "I know," said Jessica, and her voice was barely above a whisper.
You stole my husband, I continued. You stole my best friend. You stole my sense of safety in my own home. You stole my ability to trust people. And for what? For a man who turned out to be a financial failure? For a man who couldn't even provide for you? For a man who left you the moment things got difficult? I know, Jessica repeated. I know I ruined everything, and I hate myself for it. I hate what I've become because of what I did to you. I looked at Jessica. I could see that she was genuinely suffering. I could see that the consequences of her actions had caught up with her, and she was paying a heavy price. I thought about this for a long moment. I thought about Jessica's betrayal. I thought about the pain she had caused me. I thought about the years I had spent in silent suffering while she lived in my home and lied to my face. But I also thought about something my therapist had told me once. She had said, "Sarah, forgiveness is not for the person who wronged you. Forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness is about letting go of the anger so that it doesn't poison your future." I had spent so much time and energy hating Jessica and Marcus. I had spent so much time thinking about their betrayal, planning my response to their betrayal, building my empire partially out of a desire to show them what they had lost. And while that had motivated me to achieve great things, I was beginning to understand that I had given them more power over my life than they deserved. "I forgive you," I said finally. Jessica's eyes widened. "What?" "I forgive you," I repeated, "but not because I think what you did was okay. I forgive you because holding on to my anger against you is like drinking poison and expecting you to die. I forgive you because I'm moving on with my life, and I don't want you to come with me. I forgive you because you've already paid the price for what you did. You've lost everything, your best friend, your husband, your dignity, and continuing to hate you would only make me lose more." Tears streamed down Jessica's face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for that. I don't deserve it, but thank you." "No, you don't deserve it, but I'm giving it to you anyway. Not for you, for me, so that I can move on completely and never think about you again." I stood up from the table. "I'm going to walk out of this coffee shop, and I'm going to go back to my office, and I'm going to continue building my empire, and I'm never going to think about this again. You, Marcus, your betrayal, your wedding, it's all going to be in my past, and I'm going to be completely focused on my future. So this is goodbye, Jessica. I hope you figure out your life. I hope you learn from this mistake, but I don't want you in my life anymore." "I understand. Thank you for giving me the chance to apologize. Thank you for listening to me. That's more than I deserve." I nodded and walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. Over the next few years, I watched as Marcus and Jessica's lives continued to fall apart, while mine continued to soar. Marcus eventually lost everything: his house, his car, everything. He ended up working a low-wage job and living in a small apartment. Jessica bounced from man to man, never finding anyone who would commit to her, never understanding that her own selfishness and greed were the reason she couldn't build a lasting relationship. And me? I became a force in the business world. I expanded my company to multiple cities. I started mentoring young entrepreneurs, particularly young women who were trying to build something in a male-dominated industry. I became a speaker at conferences. I became someone that people looked up to. My success wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about proving something to Marcus and Jessica. It was about fulfilling the vision I had always had for myself. It was about becoming the woman I was always meant to be. Years after the wedding, I ran into Marcus on the street in downtown Miami. I was with my team, heading to an important meeting. He was alone, wearing cheap clothes, looking like a man who had given up on life. He saw me, and his face went pale. He tried to walk the other way, but I stopped him. "Hello, Marcus," I said.
Not unkindly, but not warmly either. "Sarah," he said, and his voice was small. "How are you?" "I'm wonderful," I said. "My company is worth over $1 billion now. I'm expanding into international markets. I have offices in 6 cities. I employ over 500 people. I'm doing exactly what we talked about when we were young and hungry. I'm building something big." He looked at me like I was a vision of everything he had lost. "I'm sorry," he said. "I've always been sorry. What I did to you was the biggest mistake of my life. Every single day I think about you. Every single day I regret it." "That's nice," I said, "but it doesn't matter anymore. Your apologies don't change anything. They don't undo the years I spent suffering. They don't take away the pain of your betrayal." "I know," he said. "I know they don't. But I needed you to know that I understand now. I understand what I gave up. I understand what you were capable of. And I understand that you were right all along." I looked at him for a moment, and I realized that I felt nothing for him anymore. No anger, no sadness, no love. Just nothing. He was a stranger to me, a man from my past who no longer had any hold on my present or my future. "Goodbye, Marcus," I said, and I walked away. That was the last time I ever saw him. And you know what? I didn't think about him for months after that, because my life was so full, so rich, so amazing that there was no room for the memory of a man who had tried to hold me back. This is the lesson I want to share with you, whoever you are watching this. If you're someone who has been betrayed, if you're someone who has been humiliated, if you're someone who has been told that you're not good enough, I want you to know something. Your betrayers don't get to define who you are. You get to define who you are. You get to decide who you want to become. You get to decide whether you're going to let their cruelty destroy you or whether you're going to let it fuel you to build something greater than you ever imagined. I could have given up on my graduation day. I could have believed Marcus when he told me I had nothing to contribute. I could have let Jessica's betrayal destroy me from the inside out. But I didn't. I chose to get back up. I chose to believe in myself. I chose to build my empire. And now, years later, I can tell you with complete certainty that everything I went through, every moment of pain, every night of crying, every day of suffering, it was all worth it. Not because it led to revenge, not because I got to show Marcus and Jessica what they lost, but because it led to me becoming the woman I always knew I could be. That's the real victory. That's the real triumph. Not proving something to the people who hurt me, but proving something to myself. And that's a lesson I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life. Now, I want to ask you something before I go. I want to know what you would have done in my situation. If you had been me, would you have handled things the way I did? Would you have sponsored Marcus and Jessica's wedding like I did, knowing that you were setting a trap for them? Would you have gone to that wedding and made that announcement, or would you have done something different? Would you have taken the revenge route? Would you have destroyed their wedding instead of making it beautiful? Would you have cut them off completely and never looked back? I want you to comment below and tell me what you would have done. Tell me if you think I did the right thing, or if you think I should have handled it differently. Tell me your thoughts on this story. I read every single comment, and your perspective matters to me. And before you go, I want to remind you to subscribe to Pressify Stories. If you found this story engaging, if you found yourself unable to stop watching, if you found yourself crying and laughing and feeling deeply connected to this journey, then subscribe. Turn on that notification bell so you never miss another story like this one, because I have so many more stories to share with you. There are over 100 stories on this channel, stories of triumph and tragedy, stories of love and heartbreak, stories of people who have been knocked down and who have gotten back up again, stories that will make you cry, stories that will make you laugh, stories that will remind you that no matter how bad things get, there's always hope, there's always a way forward, there's always the possibility of triumph. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. I hope this story has inspired you to become the best version of yourself. I hope it's reminded you that you are capable of more than you ever imagined. I hope it's shown you that betrayal doesn't have to define you. You get to define yourself. This is Sarah Walker signing off, and I'm excited to see what you all have to say about this story. Comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you would have done. And let me know if there are other stories you want me to tell. Until next time, keep building your empire, keep believing in yourself, and keep moving forward no matter what obstacles you face. Goodbye, and thank you again for watching Pressify Stories.